The sun had just begun to shine through the windows on the executive floor of Brooks Industries when I noticed something was wrong. The newest financial reports didn't add up. Despite unprecedented sales over the last 6 months, our numbers have mysteriously declined. It did not make sense. My name was Jessica Brooks, and I was 35 years old and staring at the devastation of my family's firm, which my father had created from the bottom up. He died 2 years ago, and I succeeded him as CEO of Brooks Industries. My father had put his trust in me to continue the company's tradition of innovation, sustainability, and honesty. But over the last 6 months, I'd come to believe that someone was working against me from within. And then I realized it was my brother-in-law, Tom. Tom married my sister, Rachel, just months before my father died. At first glance, he appeared to be the ideal candidate. Charming, confident, and a good communicator. However, over time, things began to unravel. Small troubles began to arise in the company, such as delayed shipments, misunderstanding with suppliers, and accounting inconsistencies. Mistakes that could be readily dismissed as business problems. But I knew better. I was raised in this company. I was familiar with every department, every process, and most critically, every relevant number. Something felt wrong. Then, one night, while working late, I got an email that altered everything. It was sent by mistake to the incorrect email address and was from Tom. The contents of the email were shocking. Tom had been in direct contact with one of our competitors, coordinating measures to destroy our firm. He had purposefully caused delays, prompting clients to look elsewhere, all while posing himself as the company's savior. That was the moment I realized I needed to act. I wasn't about to sit back and let someone trash my father's legacy. I began gathering evidence, every dubious transaction, email, and discussion in which two quietly undermined my authority. I documented everything. More significantly, I started making my own moves. One evening, while preparing for a board meeting, Rachel texted me. It read, "Tom claims you are wrecking the firm. Is this true?" Rachel had always been easily swayed by strong personalities, particularly Tom's confidence and smooth-talking methods, but I was not about to let him portray me as the villain. I wrote back, "Come to the board meeting today. See for yourself." The hours preceding the meeting were a haze of preparation. I double-checked my paperwork, organized everything on my laptop, and prepared for anything Tom would hurl at me. I knew it would be a battle, but I was willing to fight for the company my father had founded. At 2:45, Emily, my assistant, knocked on my office door. "They're all here," she announced. "Tom's already in the conference room with the board." I took a deep breath. It was time. As I entered the conference room, the air was thick with anxiety. Tom was sat at the head of the table, my father's former place. His crisp suit, the well-maintained appearance of concern, it all appeared so deliberate. "Jessica, thank you for joining us," he added with his silky, prepared voice. "We've called this emergency session because our company is in crisis." I took my seat, feeling the board members' eyes on me. They all knew my father. They were familiar with the company's history, but I could see it in their eyes. Some of them had already been persuaded by Tom's arguments. Rachel, seated near him, appeared disturbed. Tom went on to set out his case with great accuracy. Under Jessica's leadership, Brooks Industries saw an unprecedented downturn. Our stock price has dropped by 30%, we've lost big contracts, and our reputation has suffered. He pointed to the screen behind him, which displayed charts and graphs depicting a dismal scenario. "The numbers don't lie," he remarked firmly. "We need immediate change to save this company." I listened intently, watching Tom portray me as the inept CEO who was driving the company into the ground. His claims were meticulously crafted to appear like facts. Missed deadlines, lost contracts, financial irregularities, all with the intention of making me appear to be the problem. I understood what he was doing, and I knew I needed to stop him. "Before we vote," I responded quietly, "I'd like to present some information of my own." Tom lifted his eyebrow. "What is this?" he asked, his tone condescending. I did not respond to him right away. Instead, I connected my USB drive to the conference room's computer. The screen behind him blinked, and a completely different piece of data appeared. Emails between Tom and our opponent, documenting their attempts to sabotage our contracts. Bank transfers demonstrated questionable patterns of behavior. I had everything. Every error, every delayed shipment, and every transaction that showed Tom was undermining the company. "What is this?" Tom demanded, his composure beginning to shatter. I turned to the board members. "This is evidence of systematic sabotage orchestrated by Tom over the last 6 months." When I clicked on the next slide, the room erupted in whispering. The documents were damning. Our offshore manufacturing partner in Vietnam had revealed evidence of Tom's deliberate attempts to stall production. Our shipping coordinator had provided sworn testimony about Tom's direct directives to misplace important goods, and our IT department had discovered deleted emails from Tom outlining his scheme to undermine the organization. Tom's face changed from crimson to white, and I could see panic coming in. "These could be fabricated," he said, attempting to reclaim control of the room. I didn't let him. "Mr. Daniels," I replied, addressing our CFO, "can you validate the legitimacy of these financial records?" Mr. Daniels, who had been quietly analyzing the statistics, glanced up. "These appear to be genuine," he stated, "and they reveal serious inconsistencies that were not included in the official reports. Someone changed those reports." I could sense the room's tension change. The board members weren't simply listening. They were beginning to see the truth. Tom rushed to his feet, knocking over his chair. "This is a desperate attempt to save yourself," he hissed. "Jessica, the company is collapsing under your leadership. We need a change." "Is it?" I inquired, bringing up another document. "Because according to our real numbers, the ones you didn't manipulate, we're actually up 15% this quarter." I looked to the board members. "What about the contracts that we lost? They have already been renegotiated. Our stock price will rebound once the truth about your sabotage is revealed." The silence was terrible. Tom stood motionless, his face blanched. "You can't prove any of this," he said, his voice lacking confidence. "Actually," I replied with a slight smile, "I can." And, to seal the deal, I presented my final piece of proof. When I initially suspected what Tom was up to, I had my lawyers create this document months ago. "While you were busy undermining our contracts, I was quietly buying shares in the company," I told you. "As of last week, I now own 51% of Brooks Industries." The place burst into turmoil. Board members yelled questions. Rachel fell into tears, and Tom's face contorted in surprise. "This is impossible," he yelled. But it was not impossible. This was the truth. I remained sat while the pandemonium unfolded around me. This was my moment. The time I would regain control of the corporation my father had established. The time I would prevent Tom from destroying everything we had worked for. And while the board members considered the gravity of the situation, I realized that this was only the beginning. The fight for Brooks Industries had only just begun. "Ladies and gentlemen," I shouted, cutting through the background commotion, "we have a lot to talk about. But first, I propose that we vote to remove Tom Harris from all positions of power at Brooks Industries, effective immediately." The vote was unanimous, and with that, the man who believed he could take everything from me was gone. The aftermath of the board meeting was just as crazy as I expected. Tom had been led out of the building by security, but I knew this wasn't the end of the story. His presence had poisoned everything, and the true process of repairing the organization was only beginning. I stood in the conference room, watching Rachel break down in tears. She had always trusted Tom, but now everything she thought was shattering around her. "Jess, how could you do this?" she wailed, her voice filled with incredulity. "He was simply trying to help the company." "You do not understand." I groaned and slipped the information I had gathered about Tom's actions across the table to her. "No, Rachel. He was trying to steal it, all of it. He was undermining the firm and trying to make you think it was my responsibility." She looked at the file, her face pale. She didn't say anything for a long time, but I could see she was digesting it. After a few moments, she spoke, her voice cracking. I should have noticed it sooner. He had too much of an influence over me. I thought he was on our side. You weren't the only one, I remarked gently, looking around the boardroom at the other members. Half of them had been duped by Tom's magnetism, but they couldn't hide their emotions anymore. Some appeared guilty, others appeared astonished, but everyone was listening. That, in itself, was a victory. The days that followed were a blur of damage management and reconstruction. Our public relations team worked tirelessly to create a statement regarding the leadership transition. I spent hours on the phone with clients, assuring them that the issues they were experiencing would be addressed and rectified. However, the most significant meeting I had was with our staff. I stood in front of a packed auditorium, surrounded by familiar people, the employees who had stuck with the company through thick and thin. Many of them had seen something amiss but didn't know what to do about it. Now I needed to tell them the truth. The last 6 months have been difficult for all of us, I began, my voice echoing around the room. I know many of you have noticed things weren't quite right. Projects were delayed, communications were muddled, and decisions didn't make sense. You weren't imagining anything. There was something wrong. Someone was working against us, attempting to undermine what we'd created. I waited, watching as heads nodded and the room became quieter. But there is good news. We now know the truth. We discovered the evidence and have already begun making improvements. We'll audit every department, go over every process, and make judgments in the open. This organization was founded on creativity and honesty, and that is what we will continue to develop upon. The room erupted with applause. For the first time in months, it appeared that hope had returned to the organization. Fear and uncertainty were starting to vanish, and I knew we were on the right track. Emily arrived at my office later that day, holding a hefty file. The Singapore team sent their final report, she told me. You should see this. I glanced through the report, each page confirming what we'd already discovered. Tom had modified manufacturing schedules, resulting in delays. He had misused money and erected artificial barriers to force clients to quit. Every detail was recorded, time-stamped, and indisputable. It was the last nail in his coffin. My phone buzzed while I was reading the report. It was Rachel again. She had spent the last 3 days going over everything I had given her, attempting to make sense of it all. "Can we talk?" her message read. I found her at my father's former office, the office I had moved into following his death. She stared at his photo on the wall, lost in thought. "He would have seen right through Tom, wouldn't he?" she asked quietly, her voice filled with remorse. I sat next to her, my heart breaking for her. Probably. Dad had a sixth sense about people like Tom. He could recognize a liar from a mile away. But you weren't the only person who believed him. Half of the board brought into his lies as well, but you didn't. You noticed what he was doing. Rachel wiped her eyes and her voice cracked. "How long have you known?" I groaned, remembering when things began to disintegrate. I suspected something was awry approximately 6 months ago, but I did not have the proof. I needed to know how deep it went and exactly what he was doing. The share purchase... She nodded, indicating comprehension. "You started buying quietly when you figured it out." I grinned slightly. "Yeah, I knew he would try something. I needed to be prepared." Rachel looked at me for a long time before speaking again. "Tom is demanding a divorce settlement. He wants half of my stock in the company. He claims he is entitled to them due to his contributions to Brooks Industries." I felt a spark of satisfaction. "Let me guess. He thinks he's entitled to them because he helped you build the company." Rachel nodded in disbelief. "Yeah, he claims to have made all the important judgments." "Well, I've got news for him," I responded, opening another file on my laptop. I'd had my lawyers look into Tom's money for months. We discovered something else when checking into his activity. Tom had been hiding money he had taken from company contracts. His contribution does not exist. If anything, he'll be lucky not to face criminal charges. Rachel's eyes widened as she absorbed the information. It'll destroy his case, won't it?" I nodded, feeling a sense of righteousness sink in. "Yes, it will," The following week was full of legal meetings and company restructuring. As expected, our stock price swiftly recovered after the truth about Tom's sabotage was revealed. Several significant clients who had been lured away by our competitors were ready to return, knowing they could rely on us again. Most importantly, the company felt different. I noticed it in the way our personnel walked taller and spoke more boldly. There was no longer fear in the halls, no more whispering. We were rebuilding, and it was merely the beginning. The true win came in the quiet moments, when staff stopped to congratulate me for taking responsibility, when teams started working together without looking over their shoulders. We were finally free from Tom's harmful influence, but the fight hadn't ended yet. The weeks after the board meeting were filled with meetings, calls, and decisions. We had a lot to clean up, and there was no tolerance for mistakes. Every day felt like a test of our fortitude, but I could immediately sense the difference. Things were shifting. People began to believe in the future again. I spent more time than I had expected in the factory. My father had always believed that leadership required more than just sitting in an office or making deals behind a desk. It was about understanding the ground-level operations, the people who truly made the firm what it was. It was a lesson I was now taking to heart. Walking through the production floor, I chatted with every team and department. I wanted them to know that we were in this together. It wasn't simply about repairing what Tom had damaged. It was about regaining pride in what we had built and what we could yet achieve. Rachel and I had not communicated much in those weeks. It wasn't because I didn't want to. She was struggling with the aftermath of her divorce from Tom, and I understood it was a lot to handle. We both had scars and wounds to cater to. But that day, she came into my office looking more like herself than I had seen in a while. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly, leaning against the doorframe. "Of course," I replied, motioning for her to enter. She strolled up and sat across from me, but her eyes were filled with determination, which I hadn't seen in a long time. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened," she told me, "about the company, about what we're really trying to do here." I nodded. I could tell she was coming to terms with the mess Tom had left behind. But there was more to her comments. Something was changing. "I want to be a part of this," Rachel stated, her voice firm. "I want to learn. I want to help rebuild this company, not just for Dad, but for all of us." I couldn't help smiling. It wasn't just a shift in her attitude, it was the emergence of something I hadn't seen in her in years. My sister was finally stepping up, and I knew she was prepared to do the task. "Good," I replied simply. "Then let's get started." The actual job was only beginning. Tom may have believed he could ruin all we had accomplished, but he had overlooked an important factor. We were a family, and families rebuild together. The days after Rachel and I's chat constituted a watershed moment for me. It wasn't only cleaning up Tom's mess anymore, it was about redefining what this corporation stood for and ensuring that the Palmer name would live on beyond his deceit. Rachel jumped in head first, which surprised me. She had always preferred design and marketing, but it was evident now that she also had a keen business sense. We worked long hours together, reviewing financials, meeting with key clients, and re-establishing our credibility. Every time I saw her take the initiative on a project or offer an idea to the team, I could see the light return to her eyes. She wasn't simply attempting to set things right for herself, she was also seeking to rediscover her sense of purpose. One evening, about 2 weeks after the board meeting, I arrived late at my office after a lengthy discussion with our important stakeholders. I didn't expect to see Rachel there. She had always been the first to depart when things were done, but tonight she was sitting at her desk, staring at the computer in front of her and typing furiously. I knocked on the doorframe, surprised. "What's up?" She looked up, her face filled with a passion I hadn't seen in years. "I have been examining the legal team's final reports. There's something else Tom tried to hide that we almost missed." I raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" While seeking to undermine the firm, he also targeted Dad's legacy. I discovered a bundle of records indicating that he had been buying up shares of the company, quietly as you did, but not for the same reason. He planned to take over the company without our knowledge. A silent takeover. My stomach twisted. I never thought Tom could drop any lower, but this? This went beyond greed. It was premeditated and vicious. Is there any way to monitor the whole scope of what he was doing? I asked, my voice tight with rage. Rachel nodded. Our legal staff is working on it, but we might be able to use this against him in the divorce settlement, along with everything else we discovered. I sat down across from her and ran my fingers through my hair. This was bigger than I had expected. Tom had attempted not only to destroy the business, but also to erase its past and steal everything we had worked for. He'd sought to steal something far more significant than money, our identities. But now, we're fighting back. The truth was on our side. Rachel and I spent the next several days gathering everything we had, every email, record, and testimony. It was an avalanche of evidence, all pointing to the same conclusion. Tom was a fraud, a thief who attempted to destroy what our father had built for the sake of his own vanity. It was not only a betrayal of our family, but of everything Palmer Industries stood for: integrity, innovation, transparency. I knew we couldn't allow him to get away with it. By the time the legal team had finished processing everything, we had enough to bring him down, not only in court, but also in the eyes of the firm, our employees, and the general public. We've planned the next round of discussions with the board and important investors. This time, I was not entering into a room full of supporters. I was in front of a room full of people who had previously supported Tom and believed his falsehoods. However, this time, the truth would be impossible to refute. The day of the meeting came. Everyone's gaze shifted between Rachel, me, and the door through which Tom was meant to arrive. It wasn't simply another boardroom meeting, it was a reckoning. Tom strolled in, his face flushed, and he maintained the same air of confidence as the previous time we were in that room, but I could see the fissures now. He wasn't the unshakable executive he'd claimed to be. I stood up and faced him immediately. "Michael," I said coldly, using his full name. "This time the numbers don't lie." Rachel moved to the projector and pressed a button that displayed the documents we had discovered: emails, records, and shared purchase reports. Tom's face became pale as he realized the facts. "Would you like to clarify this?" I asked, my voice strong and unyielding. The room was silent. I could feel the anxiety in the air. Everyone was waiting for the inevitable. Tom attempted to recover, but his speech was weak and stammering. Everything here is made up. You cannot establish any of this." Rachel's words broke through the tension. "We don't have to prove it, Michael. It's all good here. Your attempts to damage the company, the faked reports, the covert share purchases, you are not only a terrible leader, but also a criminal." I turned to face the board. "You all knew Dad. You were aware of the foundation upon which Palmer Industries was constructed. Are you really going to let this man continue to demolish everything we've worked for?" I could see it then, the weight of the truth settling in. The board members exchanged looks, their unease evident. There was no denying it. Michael was finished. "We're voting today," I announced, "and I move that we remove Michael from any position of power within Palmer Industries." The meeting ended shortly. The vote was unanimous. Tom was let out, his name and boasts of saving the company abandoned in the wreckage of his own creating. Rachel and I walked out of the boardroom together, feeling the weight of the victory and the new burden of leadership that now rested on our shoulders. The aftermath of the board meeting was tumultuous and essential. As the last logistics of Tom's evacuation were worked out, I couldn't help but sense the gravity of what had just occurred. We'd won the war, but the hard job was just beginning. It wasn't just about driving him out of the firm, it was about rebuilding what he'd tried to destroy: our trust in the company, in each other, and in the very values Palmer Industries was founded on. The first stage was damage control. We needed to reassure our employees, clients, and stakeholders that Palmer Industries remained robust. I spent the next 3 days on the phone with clients, telling them that everything was under control and that the company would emerge stronger. Many of them had already been made aware of the situation, but some had been badly rattled by the chaos. I had to make sure everyone realized that Palmer Industries' integrity will always be our guiding light, no matter who tried to pull us off course. The employees, however, told a different perspective. They'd been living in the shadow of Tom's sabotage for months, and the consequences were obvious in their work. The atmosphere had altered. There had been dread, uncertainty, and distrust. The hallways were colder, and the air was filled with talk. Everyone was wondering what would happen next, and what their function will be in the organization going ahead. That's when Rachel and I realized it was time to address them directly. We convened an all-staff meeting, and I made sure to begin by acknowledging the difficult months everyone had been through. The company suffered not just from a loss of business or contracts, but also from Tom's conduct, which had divided the team spirit. That was what I saw in their eyes. It was no longer about numbers and profit margins, it was about people. Employees were the heart of Palmer Industries, and they needed to feel like they were part of the rebuilding process rather than just victims. I took a big breath as I stood in front of the auditorium, filled with familiar people. I understand things have not been easy lately. You've all seen things go wrong, projects be delayed, messages get lost, and decisions make no sense. It was not your fault, but we can't move forward unless we work together and rebuild from the ground up. Rachel stood alongside me with her hand on the platform. We will make sure that never happens again. We intend to audit every department, analyze every procedure, and make every decision in the open. Transparency will be central to all we do from now on. I could see the mood shift in the room as people began to nod, their eyes brightening with optimism. The anxiety and confusion that had engulfed the organization for months began to subside. We're going to rebuild Palmer Industries, and we're going to do it the right way, I said. Innovation and ethics have always served as our guiding principles. We will not compromise on it. We're going to push forward together. The applause began slowly and hesitantly, but eventually became louder. For the first time in months, employees appeared to feel that change was possible. They weren't simply waiting for the storm to pass, they were eager to be a part of something greater. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the office began to change. People were chatting again, brainstorming, cooperating, and exchanging ideas. There was a newfound sense of purpose, which spread like wildfire. Our department heads were eager to begin the auditing process, understanding that the goal was not punishment, but rather the discovery of new ways to strengthen the organization. It wasn't just about righting past wrongs. It was also about laying a solid foundation for whatever the future has in store for us. Rachel and I collaborated to put the adjustments we agreed on into action. We moved forward with new technologies, reached out to new clients, and started building community outreach programs to give back to the people who had helped Palmer Industries over the years. The last nail in Tom's coffin came a week after his removal. Legal paperwork documenting everything we had discovered about his financial wrongdoing. He had attempted to divert funds from the corporation into private accounts, using his position to hide his traces. And once the divorce was finalized, Kate would be entitled to a share of the hidden assets, which didn't sit well with him. I forwarded the documents to the legal staff, who promptly began constructing a case against him. Kate was more than prepared for the struggle and eager to see it through. But I could tell it was difficult for her. She had been through so much previously. The betrayal had hit harder than she had anticipated, and her faith in people, particularly men, had been shattered. "I should have seen it," she said to me one night as we sat in the office going over the papers. "He was usually really convincing. I simply wanted to believe him." I reached out and put my hand on hers. "You weren't the only person he duped. He nearly deceived all of us. But you did not give up. You did not let him break you. And now we can finish. Together." The following few days were a haze of legal meetings, restructuring, and long hours at the office. As we dug further, I saw how close Tom had come to getting exactly what he desired. But the truth had out, and justice was gradually catching up with him. Throughout it all I could think about was Dad. He had always stated that integrity is the foundation of any successful business. Tom's downfall was confirmation of this. He sought to destroy everything for his personal gain, but it was the power of Palmer Industries' beliefs that ultimately kept us standing, and we were only getting started. Months passed, and Palmer Industries continued to grow in ways I never imagined imaginable. It was as if a weight had been taken off our shoulders, allowing the company to breathe, expand, and evolve once more. Tom had misunderstood and underestimated the very thing that would save us, our own people. Integrity and creativity were more than simply ideas. They were ingrained in the way we worked, communicated, and cared for one another and the firm my father had established. The legal battle with Tom dragged on, but each day revealed that his attempts to drive us apart had only increased our determination. The fraud and manipulation he'd tried to conceal were gradually becoming public awareness. Kate had to battle for what she deserved, but she wasn't alone. As she received clarity on everything, she stood taller than ever, convinced that Tom was not the man she thought he was. The people who had previously supported him now saw his true face, and they began to comprehend the danger he posed to all of us. Not only did the legal situation change, every department had been reformed to promote transparency and confidence. Rachel and I worked relentlessly alongside our team to establish an environment in which everyone had a voice, ideas were encouraged, and fear had no place. The consequences were undeniable. Productivity surged, innovation blossomed. Employees felt energized again after learning they had a role in Palmer Industries' destiny. However, the most significant adjustment resulted from feedback from clients and partners. Once the truth about Tom's sabotage was out, many clients who had abandoned us during the crisis began to return. Their trust in Palmer Industries was restored, not just because of our tenacity, but also because of how we handled the situation, with grace, professionalism, and unflinching honesty. 3 months following Tom's departure, we had our best quarter in history. We had not only survived the storm, but emerged stronger than before. I could sense my father's presence in every decision we made. He had always believed in the company's core beliefs, and now we were demonstrating that those ideals could resist even the most severe attacks. As I stood in the plant one afternoon, watching colleagues work with fresh pride, I reflected on everything we'd conquered. "Dad would be proud," a worker stated softly but with real admiration. I nodded, feeling the impact of his words. "We're not done yet," I said. "There's still so much to build." And there was. Palmer Industries was back on track to not only survive, but thrive. But this time, we weren't just hanging on, we were leading. Leading with creativity, honesty, and a team that is stronger than Tom's treachery. Our future has never been brighter.